Hi, and welcome to another Tuesday night podcast. And we are with Jeb Smith. He is actually returning to our show. We podcasted a couple months ago, and Jeb's a fellow broker out in Southern California. And we're really in a crazy time, huh, Jeb, right now?
It's wild, man. I mean, I've been doing this nearly 18 years, and I've been through some what I feel are crazy markets, right? I mean, the experienced agents of 30 plus years have seen a lot more than I have, but I feel like this market is a lot different than anything I've experienced with regards to inventory levels, buyers. I mean, I'm not telling anybody that follows this probably anything they don't know, but I'm still surprised.
Definitely. And tonight, buyers, we're talking to you. So I'm Todd Sachs. I'm the founder and broker here at Sachs Realty. We're a real estate brokerage in Maryland. We help buyers and sellers in Maryland, but we also help buyers and sellers all over the country through an amazing broker network that we have with great brokers like Jeb. And we're talking about buyer fatigue. Right now, like Jeb is saying, it's a crazy time. And we're experiencing it in Maryland. He's experiencing it in California. But anyway, so Jeb, just kind of, for those that don't know you, just tell them who you are and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. I am a real estate broker. I've been in the real estate business since 2002 in Southern California that entire time. And I originally started out on the lending side of the business and owned a mortgage company. So I not just coming to you, I guess, those listeners from a real estate perspective, I also kind of had the finance perspective in mind as well, right? So I understand loans, I understand finance, and I don't do loans, I don't do any of that, but I help buyers and sellers and kind of, make sense of all of that information. And I think that gives me a leg up as a listing agent or as a selling agent, understanding the finance, because I can look at pre-approvals, I can look at certain things and help people make decisions based on that information. But like I mentioned, I'm in Southern California, and I a lot like yourself, helping buyers, helping sellers in a crazy market. I'm fortunate that the majority of my business is relational. It comes from past clients, friends, and family, and a lot of top producing real estate agents all over the country. So when I come to you and I talk about the Southern California market per se, I also come at you with experience from other markets, right? Because I'm networking with not only professionals in, say, Maryland like yourself, but professionals in Washington or Oregon or Las Vegas or Texas or wherever. Because, I feel like by networking with like-minded individuals, not only does it help us become better at our jobs, better brokers, but we get an idea of what's happening in other markets, right? And I think if I were the only one saying that Southern California is a strong market where everything else was weakening or changing, then my perspective probably would be a little bit jaded. But when I can come to you and talk about, hey, this is what's happening in my market, but it's also happening in these markets because I'm talking to people that are having the same experience, I think it provides value for not only the people that, that I'm helping, but also a lot of those, different buyers and sellers across the country.
Yeah. And from a lending standpoint, this is historical low interest rates, right? I mean, we're seeing, I think I saw somewhere in the mid twos earlier this week, and for a 30-year fixed mortgage. So it's not just the fact that we're going through an incredible shortage of inventory. We're seeing that, millennial buyers, they're making up 35% of the buyers in 2020 and 2019. And there's talk about over the next several years, there's like 10 million of these millennial buyers that could possibly going to the marketplace for the next several years. That's per year. So when we're looking at, little inventory, low interest rates, very stressful times for these buyers. So, Jeb, there's a lot of people that are saying we're setting ourselves up for a housing market crash. Mm-hmm. And, we both went through 2008, me as a builder and a contractor and renovator, I saw it start to get rough in 2005 here locally. The Baltimore headlines said, the overpriced Baltimore housing market. That was in 2005. By 2008, it was a bloodbath, right? The housing prices were just tumbling. There's a lot of talk. Do you see a lot of resemblance, similarities in that high-priced market that was like 2006, 2007, pre-crash of 2008?
The only similarity I really see, and I'll explain some of the differences or what I feel are the differences in 2008 versus now. But to answer the question, the only similarity I see is that there's fear. There's fear that there's a bubble. There's fear that all of this has to come to an end because things are moving so quickly, which is a lot of what we saw in 2006. But to me, it's a different market. It's a different environment completely. Anybody that was around during that time, went through that time, whether you were on the real estate side and you were selling property, maybe you were on the real estate side and you were buying property, you were a buyer or a seller during that time, or builder or what have you, right? I mean, you have something to relate back to that when you think of that time. And so, when I think back then, the writing was on the wall. I was in the lending business primarily during that time. I was doing real estate, but it wasn't really my sole focus like it is today. And we knew that there were problems, right? We knew when we were doing these loans that there were problems, and we didn't expect it to come to fruition as quick as it did, right? The hammer kind of dropped in, I think, March of 2007-ish, I think is kind of when it started to happen with New Century. And remember, a lot of these big subprime companies are based here in Orange County. And so a lot of my friends, a lot of the people I knew like very, very well were involved in some form or fashion in one of these business where they worked there, they were an executive there, or what have you. So it was dire here in Orange County at that time. But the differences during that time versus now is at that time you had over 10 months supply of homes. So 10 plus months supply of homes. And in a balanced market, at least here in Southern California, I would say 6 to 7 months is pretty balanced. I mean, buyers and sellers are equal. No one really has the advantage. You price a property at fair market value. Well, basically sell it fair market value or a couple % here or there, right? But 10 month supply then. Right now, we have less than 2 month supply in most markets. So completely different on the inventory level. Back then, the loans were completely different, right? So back then you had loans, people call them liar loans. You can call them whatever you want, but buyers were able to get loans with zero money down in some cases, sometimes even more than the house is worth. You were able to do 105s and 110s and 125s in some of these cases, which means that you were able to borrow 125% of the value. Negative amortization loans, which means when you paid the loan, you weren't even paying the principal on it. You weren't paying all the interest either, so that your balance was going up every month. And people could get these loans at 100% financing with very little to no documentation. They didn't have to have money in the bank. There was no proof of income. It was I won't use the word, it was a crap show, right? It was lending at its worst. And so those were two of the big drivers of what caused the housing crash then. And also you have to remember at that time, interest rates were in the mid sixes, probably, give or take. I don't remember exactly, but say mid sixes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of the loans during that period of time were adjustable rate loans. So we mentioned negative amortization, but we didn't mention adjustable rate. What is that? That means that your loan was only fixed for a period of say 3-5 years. In some cases, shorter periods of time, and a lot of them were interest only. Meaning that you weren't paying the principal on the loan, just the interest. And so what happened was, as those loans started to adjust, and we'll move out now a couple of years after 2007, say 8, 9, because a lot of these loans were taken out in 05, 06. You had people that property values had dropped, right? Because I mean, this wasn't just a housing crisis. This was a global financial crisis. This affected England. This affected Europe. I mean, it affected the entire world. It wasn't just the United States. And so as this started to happen, you started having, financial issues with the banks and what have you. And I'm not going to get into all that, and then you have the tranches and all of the stuff that with mortgage-backed securities that were an issue. But to the point is that you don't have those issues today or any of those things going on, right? You have a inventory at its low, interest rates at an all-time low. Most people taking a 30-year fixed mortgage out. There's more equity in property today than there's ever been in the history of owning property. You have savings. I believe last year, I don't remember what the amount was. I think it was like 1.2 trillion or something. People have more savings now than they've ever had in their entire lives. Now, I know there's people suffering. I know there's a lot of issues out there that need to be addressed and what have you, but we're talking from a macro look at everything. And so you don't have those issues that you had then. So, supply and demand are what drive markets, whether it's real estate, whether it's anything, any commodity, right? It drives it. So as long as supply stays low, people can continue to enter the market, right? And you mentioned millennials a moment ago. That's the biggest buyer pool. They're just starting to become prime buying age. That will be the biggest buying pool of buyers to ever enter the housing market. And that's just starting. We're just in the first few years of that. So that's going to continue for some period of time. So you just have all of these factors that support strong housing. Now, people can only buy what's out there, right? And so as long as supply stays low, I think you're going to have this frenzy. And it's being driven by a couple of different things. Not only is it low supply, but you have now people being able to work remotely, no longer have to worry about carpooling in or whatever. They can literally work from anywhere. You got people that, no longer have to sell their property because they were able to refinance and get a rate that they've never seen. So now their payment's lower than it's ever been. Just all of these different factors, I think, playing into it. And so it makes it tough for buyers. I mean, that's what I think what we're getting around to here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I definitely don't see the same. I mean, you watch, a lot of the shows and they're saying, hey, the market's going to crash. It's right around the corner. A lot of them are predicting it's in 21. I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think it looks nothing like it did in 08. But I do see some indicators. I do see some loans being made. There are some statement loans, where they don't have to, show their income as long as they can show the money in the bank. But let's really dive in and talk about, if you're a buyer right now, if you're a millennial, I mean, the big question is, should you cool off a little bit? I mean, I know that, we talk about there are some tough times for, certain folks out there. I mean, this pandemic has been tremendously difficult for everybody, but there really has been some winners and losers financially. And there are certain industries that have really been just hit hard. And unfortunately, I think that once this whole forbearance thing starts to kind of shake out and they, kind of draw some lines in the sand, I don't think we're close to that yet. I could be wrong. But I think what's going to happen is that if people are ending up in a situation where they need to get out of the house, get out of that mortgage, I think that, like you said, they have equity. There's been more equity in homes right now since I think 1990, to where, their worth versus what they owe. And that's good to see. So I do believe with this shortage and the amount of buyers that are out there, that it can be absorbed, rather quickly. And that I don't think it will be as bad or as hard on people as it was that where it completely destroyed their credit and they owed, they sold their house for $20,000 or $30,000 less than what they owed and ended up with all this debt and that kind of stuff. But let's kind of talk about what is happening, because I'll tell you what we're seeing here is the same thing as you. I mean, we're seeing an environment where we have a buyer and, now they're coming into 3 and 4 houses that they've lost.
Mm-hmm.
They're actively out in the market. They're very well qualified. They have plenty of cash down and they're still losing out. So I'll give you an example. I mean, we had the other day, I had to talk one of my agents literally off the shelf. I mean, she was completely stressed out saying, I don't know what to do. This is kind of crazy. And Jeb, you and I as leaders are commissioned to figure this stuff out, right? I mean, we have to figure out, and somewhere in business, these pain points, consumer pain points, there's opportunity. And we'll talk about that, talk about what consumers should be expecting from people like us to serve them. But anyway, this situation was, my agent was completely stressed out saying, this is the third time we've got a couple that wants to buy their first home. And 3 times they got beat out. And in this particular situation, they thought, even after talking to the listing agent, my agent felt really good that we were at $20,000 over list price. Now we're talking about a $650,000 price range. So for you guys listening, when you're looking at, agents aren't trying to price things, under the market right now. If anything, the pressure is hot right now for their agent to get them the most amount of money. So if you just kind of think this through, this house was priced in the range of where we think it should have been priced. And we have a buyer that's going in and that is offering $20,000 more than that, with another $10,000 in what's considered an escalation clause. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what an escalation clause is, but we're really looking at offering up to $30,000 if they have offers that go up incrementally, right? Mm-hmm. To cap out at that $30,000 over list price. And we weren't even close, according to the agent. Now, we don't know what that number is yet because it hasn't settled. And ethically, and agents are obligated. They can't really say, hey, this was the price, because if it does hit the market again, they would be putting their sellers at a disadvantage, perhaps. But anyway, Jeb, you're experiencing the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
What do you tell a buyer? Do we tell buyers, cool off? It's your kid. Your kid's now entering into the space of wanting to buy a house. As professionals, what do you say?
It's tough. It's really tough, Todd. I talk about this morning in a video that I did where I was talking about what it means to be a buyer right now. And it's, buying a property is an emotional process, right? Most people buy emotionally, justify logically. And right now people are, they're tired of putting in offers. They're feeling not confident in a lot of cases, and it's just one of those. It's just tough. And what I try to be is be transparent with buyers, but also I don't want to dissuade people from or discourage them from buying a house. That's my goal as an agent, obviously, is to sell property, right? But it's to make sure that people are happy when they buy the property, and that they feel like they're getting a good deal, and that their best interests were represented and what have you. But at the same time, you want to be real with people. And so I'm being completely transparent with a lot of people, and maybe I lose some buyers because of it, but I'm okay, because I'd rather set proper expectations up front of what people should expect on a kind of a worst case scenario. And it sounds like I'm being pessimistic, but to me, it's being more realistic, right? I approach it as hey, listen, you're in a very competitive market, low inventory. The price range that you're in is going to be one that you're going to have a lot of buyers in. If there's something you want to see, we're going to need to see it quickly. We're likely going to need to write an offer quickly. And, let's take a look at the last 5 sales in said neighborhood. As you can see from here, they all sold 2-3% over the asking price. Well, chances are, if this comes to market and it's priced right, you should expect somewhere around 2 to 3% above the asking price based on the value that you're in, or this neighborhood that you're in, or what have you, right? You can change that based on the comparables. Are you okay with that? No, I'm not. Okay. And then we go down a different conversation. Yes, we are. Okay. Well, that's the type of mindset and mentality that you got to have going in. Doesn't mean that's going to happen to you, but I just want to understand, and you can write an offer wherever you'd like to write it, right? I'm not here to tell you where to write an offer as an agent. I give you the facts and tell you what the market's doing. I'll write an offer anywhere you want to write it, but just understand this is where things are going, and let people kind of take it the way they want to take it. Some people are like, I don't want to get into a bidding war. Okay, well then this might not be the market right now, right? Maybe it's a good time to just sit and wait and see what happens. But if you're planning on buying, I would say in the next 6 months, chances are you're going to have some competition if the property's priced right, in the price range that you're in. Now, in our market, we have a luxury price point. We have some other things. So depending on where you fall, you may not have to deal with as competitive of, buying pool or what have you. But, you're just trying to be real with people, but not be like, you don't want to be like Winnie the Pooh. And, it's like, everything is bad and there's a rainy cloud following you around. But people should know what they're getting into, because I think depending on who they watch, who they follow, it's a lot like politics, right? I mean, depending on which side you're on, that's going to feed your agenda. And it's no different from real estate. If you think there's a crash coming and you're watching things on a housing crash, then that's going to be the mindset that you have, and kind of vice versa. And I think right now it's not about whether there's a crash coming or whether there's not. It's, if you want to buy in this market, this is where things are. Are you okay with it? Are you comfortable? Are you, I tell buyers all the time, they ask me, is now a good time to buy? I don't know. It depends. What's your plan? Do you have a plan? Are you stretching yourself financially with that monthly payment? Do you have reserves in the bank after you make that down payment? Are you planning on, trying to sell the property in a year or 2 years? Because if you are, you might hold off. But if you're planning on being in it for, say, 5+ years, you're comfortable, with everything, then yeah, I think you're probably in a good space. But it's tough, Todd. It's not black and white. There's a big gray area at the moment. And it's not because I don't feel like that I feel like something bad's going to happen. It's more like I just don't. It's hard to navigate people in an environment that we've never seen, for one, but also in an environment where you, like, for example, a property that I recently listed for sale just a couple of days ago. There were 13 offers in 2 days, and this is an 815 price point. Out of those 13 offers, every single buyer had 20% down. Every single buyer. So you think about the price point, 815,000. That's over $160,000 down, right? For just 20%. That was, every buyer had at least that. They all had decent credit, or, I had the DU approvals. So everybody was well qualified. So how does the buyer or the seller decide on offers? And it comes, honestly, it comes down most cases to money. Who's got the biggest pocketbook? And that scares me a little bit, because I'm seeing prices go up so fast that I'm not scared about the crash per se. I'm more scared about what is going to happen to the entry-level buyers, the first-time home buyers in this type of market. That's what worries me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the same conversation. There's a little difference, obviously, Southern California to Maryland, where we are. When you talk about the higher price market, that could probably be $5 or $6 million or more in your market, and maybe in our market it's $2 million. We are outside of DC, but in generally speaking. But we're even seeing that high pressure, multiple offers on the higher price properties as well. So before, it used to be, if you hit that middle housing price range, medium price range, then the pressure was hot and a lot of buyers. But now we're actually seeing the high pressure in the upper price range too. And I personally think, if you're buying, if you're listening to this podcast and you're in the market to buy, like Jeb said, I think, cash is very important. I think that you need to be prepared that when you're buying, in the market that we're in right now, that you do have more of a reserve than just your down payment, because when you step into home ownership, things break. There are other expenses that you'll be faced with. You're going to want to make it home and make it exactly, because maybe you didn't get to pick exactly the setup that was available for you. So you want to be able to build that equity and sweat equity and have a little bit of cash. But I think it's important, and what you said also, is how long will you keep it? Because if you're thinking right now, you're buying and you're settling on something, and you're settling on something with the intentions that, hey, we'll just buy it for 2 years or something like that, you're really at a higher risk of any type of downturn. So I've been in the housing market for 32 years this year, as a contractor and builder, not as a broker or an agent selling homes, but really have a lot of experience in residential housing since 1989. And probably the biggest experience that I had with a downturn was that '08 that we're talking about. And in Maryland here, we were probably hit across the country as bad, if not worse than most areas. And we were actually the slowest to recover. So when you had like streets in Las Vegas that were completely, abandoned, they bounced back quicker than some of our neighborhoods here in Maryland. And because we saw a huge 25, 30% year over year increases in real estate, which was insanity. So we still came back. So if you look at that was in '08 and one of the worst housing price crashes, if you were able to stay on in your home, it was something that you could live in and you could make it to right now. You have equity now. You've made it back. Chances are you've made it back.
Yep.
Right. So if you're looking at, if there is that downturn, and you're happy with where you are and you're like, hey, we can overpay a little bit if it does dip down because we're going to stay here for the next 10 or 15 years. I think you're going to be great. Let's talk about, you were talking about cash. What's cash doing to the appraised values? Because there are a lot of cash buyers. I just settled one today, right? We were in a 780,000, multiple offers. We won because we were cash.
Yeah. So I have two feelings about cash. One, as a listing agent representing, sellers and buyers come in with cash. Depending on the seller situation, cash to me means nothing in a lot of ways, right? Because a loan is as good as cash in most cases, unless you start getting crazy with prices, right? And appraisals and what have you. Then it can be a different element. The problem I have with cash is people think that they can offer you cash and they don't have to maybe come up to as high as some of the other offers because they're cash and everybody thinks cash is king. And it is in a lot of ways. But at the same time, if I'm a seller and I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, you offer me cash and another buyer offers me more money. They have good qualifications, everything's good. Me as an agent, I'm telling my client, hey, maybe it falls apart, maybe it doesn't, but that gives you 20, 30 grand more. Let's try that offer. So that's one way that cash isn't necessarily king, but I think you're asking from an appraisal standpoint. And so, when somebody's paying cash, typically there's no appraisal involved. And so if they go well above and beyond the asking price and it closes, that is essentially the new comparable in that neighborhood, if you will. But I will also say that right now with appraisal waivers and some other things out there, I'm seeing, things happen where, buyers are going above and beyond the asking price in some of these cases. I have a property that's listed at 630 in a city called Santa Ana here in California. Median home price is lower than it is in Huntington Beach where I am. And that property was priced right at 630. We got an offer for a loan at 700,000, 70,000 more. So that's more than 10% of the asking price. And that buyer got an appraisal waiver on that appraisal. So there was no appraisal involved. And so that just set a new comp for that neighborhood, when that closes. And so, cash will always kind of be what people idolize, I think. But, I think that's why it's experience, makes more sense to have an experienced agent representing you on the selling side because they can discuss things like this with you, right? I mean, in some cases, cash offer is best. I wouldn't say it's always best. And you brought up something a moment ago that I want to go back to because I was thinking about it. And what I will relate the housing market to kind of right now is the stock market, right? And not that it's like the stock market, but I want to use the stock market as an example. And, the stock market is everybody wants to time when to buy a stock. I want to buy it at the low, sell it at the high. And we all know that's a fool's game, right? It's very, very hard to do regardless, only the most savvy investors out there are even doing that. And right now stocks are kind of a hot topic at the moment, just because of what's going on the last couple of days. But you have people trying to time when a stock is going to bottom out or when it's not. And it's a lot like housing. People are trying to pick the bottom, pick the top. They think a crash is coming, or no, it's not. It's still going to go up or what have you. And you have to realize, like a stock, you only take that loss if you sell the property, right? And so you mentioned, we talked about holding a property for 2 years or what have you. If you have the ability and your plan is to be long-term in that property, chances are any short-term loss, regardless of how big, chances are you're going to make it up over time. And that's the same thing with the stock market. If you look at the stock market over time, just like the housing market, go back as far as you want, over time, you continue to get that appreciation just like you do there. And so, but if you're one of those people that are constantly looking at the value every single day, worried about what your portfolio is doing, wonder what your house price is doing, you're gonna drive yourself crazy, because that is the difficult part. Most people fortunately live in the payment, and that's why I think it's comfortable, with the right approach to make sure you're comfortable with that payment, right? Make sure because that's what you look at every month. You're not looking at the value of your house in most cases every month. So just make sure you're getting in a comfortable point, and that way volatility in the market doesn't drive you crazy. So,
and don't make the volatility in the market your bad decision when you buy, right? So, what we see a lot of times, and, if you're buying, we see buyers are actually, they know what it is that's ideal for them. So if you're looking for something that you're going to stay in long-term, but you make these adjustments to what you really want or need, and they're so drastic that you're going to be forced to liquidate because you hate it so much. And I'll give you an example. I mean, distance is a big thing. I mean, we're working from home right now, but what I hear when I'm talking to a lot of people is they're going, man, I can't wait to get back in the office again, or at least a hybrid, 3 or 4 days a week. So when the pandemic started to happen, we started to see buyers say, well, we really want to be in this area, but since we're so impatient and we're not willing to wait, or, we're unrealistic with what we're willing to pay, we're willing to go somewhere that we wouldn't have otherwise gone to because we work from home now anyway. Right. So now, and I have a friend of mine whose son did just this, and he bought, 45 minutes up the road. Some people, I mean, we're close to the Pennsylvania state. I mean, some people even drive an hour or 45 minutes into another state, right? And then the traffic comes, and, then they find out that there are other fees involved, or they find out that when the market does a downturn, those areas become really soft and they lose a lot more than if they would have been in the area that they wanted to be in the first place. So with me, a lot of it is like, manage your expectations. Have a great agent. And it's funny, Jeb, because you and I had a conversation of whether we'd be replaced one day, right? Real estate agents or brokers. I mean, will we be gone? The internet wants us. And even I think some of the people even say, like, what the heck do we do? Well, this is what we do. I mean, we try and guide people through this process so that they don't make costly mistakes, right? Because they're not thinking about it. We've been in the business. We've seen markets up. We've seen markets down. And what I always say to people is, if you're more impatient than you are practical or realistic, cool off.
No,
don't make that, irrational decision. But if we can have a realistic conversation about what those boxes are that you want to check, and we can check a large percentage of them, and we can look at things like improvements to make it more ideal. Back in the old days, people will walk into a house and go like, "Oh, I could never live here. It's got pink walls." Going, right. Like, it's freaking paint. Or they'll say, like, way too much wallpaper for me. I don't want to get into that. Well, we don't really have those conversations anymore. Now we're having conversations about, okay, the living room, dining room combination isn't exactly what you wanted. Can $10,000 next year make those changes and make it more ideal, to where that opens up your selection possibilities versus being very narrow-minded and things like that.
No, absolutely.
Jeb, agent selection is very important, right? If there's one message that I would say to a buyer right now, and look, I'm not trying to piss off your sister or your mother or your aunt or whatever for that matter. So guys, if you're agents out there, don't fire away on me here, or if you want to, go ahead. But anyway, my point is that just like there, good and bad and everything, there's good and bad agents, right? Good and bad brokers and leaders in any business. But Jeb, being in the situation we're in right now, where we know buyer fatigue is, at least for you and me, at career highs. We're seeing that buyers are frustrated. Mm-hmm. And we know, you and me know, that because most of the cases, right? I mean, it's the sellers that pay for the commissions, right? The buyers, a lot of times, the buyers use their best friends, mm-hmm. or they use, people that, they don't know their qualifications. So my question to you is this: has this market changed your opinion on how buyers should interview and select buyers agents?
I don't know that it's changed it, because I've always had that opinion. And that opinion being, don't just work with the person that's convenient because they're convenient. And that being your friend, that being your mom, your dad, or whoever it is, just because they have a license, right? I'm in Southern California. And I will tell you, I tell people this all the time. There's absolutely no chance you don't know someone that has a real estate license, because even people that don't practice real estate have a license. And even more so now, right? Because times are hot, things are going well, more people are going to get it. And they just have it kind of sitting there and never do anything with it. So everyone knows someone, and it's easy to get. Quite frankly, it's an easy thing to get. But what doesn't come with that license is experience. What doesn't come with that license is the trials and tribulations, the things that actually happen during a transaction that you need a professional negotiating. And so what I tell, like anyone, is just make sure, that the people have the experience, right? They need to know not only the market that you're in, right? I mean, for example, like if you called me today, Todd, and said, "Hey, listen, I got a listing in LA or Santa Monica or whatever, you're my guy." I'd be like, "Todd, unfortunately, I'm not your guy, right? That's not my market. It's too far from me, for one, but also I don't know that market." You need somebody that knows the market that you want to be in. And I would say that doesn't necessarily have to mean the community. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the city. It just somebody needs experience in selling property throughout that area, right? Maybe it's one here and there, or maybe it's 10 a year or what have you. You just need somebody that knows that market and can pull comparables. And our market's a little bit different than a lot, right? So some cases, some areas in the country, you got rural property. And if you wanted me to go comp a rural property, I would tell you I have no idea what to do, because nothing around here is rural, right? I mean, everything we have is based on a housing track, a development, and a lot of it looks similar, whether it's, changes here and there. There's not a lot of custom in ways. It's just they were all built the same, kind of at the same time over years and what have you. And so it's really not easy to comp properties out, but you need somebody that can do that. You also need somebody that, if you're buying a property, can guide you, right? And like I said earlier, and be able to look at what's sold and give you an idea of where things may be, but tell you how to write offers, tell you how to stand out in that process. I was talking to my wife earlier today, and I said, what you're going to have here shortly is you're going to have a lot of people questioning what they pay you, right? On the selling side, because they're going to see it's a hot housing market. That house sold in 3 days. What did that agent do? He just put it on the market. And what they don't see is everything that goes on behind the scenes, right? In this case, 13 offers received. I had to go through each one of those offers, break it down on basically I made a spreadsheet, compared every single one of these things, the key components of it, broke it down, helped my client understand it, went through the pre-approval letters, contacted those lenders, made sure that everything in there was accurate based on that. And then that's just the negotiating part. Like, we haven't even actually got into escrow yet, right? And people think, Well, you go into escrow, the deal's over. No, that's just the first negotiation. You have potentially appraisal issues that you're going to have to justify one way or the other. You're going to have home inspections that come up. Maybe you have different inspections depending on what part of the country you're in. There's a lot of things that happen during a transaction that, need, because it's an emotional process, right? For most people, even on the selling side, it's an emotional process. And so you need not only hand holding, but you need somebody knowledgeable there to be able to guide you through that process. And I don't want to badmouth new agents, because every agent has to start somewhere, and there could very well be great agents that are just starting in this business. So, you have to ask the right questions. Ask them experience level, how they're getting to certain things, how they plan on, negotiating, if, just different scenarios. And I'm not really coming up with some concrete things here, because I'm on, I more or less address the questions as they come into me from sellers and from buyers, versus, hey, saying this is what you should ask. But I think it comes down to experience. It really does. And that doesn't mean, Todd, as you know, just because you've been in the business 20 years, you're a great agent, right? It doesn't mean you've sold a lot of property, right? You can have a license that's 30 years old and never sold a property. So, there's a lot of information out there that you can find on people online, without, so check people's reviews. I've had clients ask me, hey, can I call your clients? Can I call the last 3 houses you've sold? Sure. Here's their phone number. Call them. And now I'm, and that sort of thing goes a long way, because let them have a conversation with somebody that's actually done business with you, because they'll have, an idea of what to expect. So I know that was a long way of running around there, but
it's 100%. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think that what people don't really, first of all, a lot of people don't know what we do, right? We established that in our last podcast together. I mean, they think that, we make a lot of money, and they look at the fees, but they don't understand how an agent can actually prevent that deal from happening, just basically by just not doing their job. And you being a buyer in this case, you don't even know why you didn't get the deal. And I'm going to give you an example, because understand something. As a broker, and managing agents, I can't hear every conversation that's going on. And a lot of the conversations where, your fate into buying that house and getting it or not is completely 100% dependent upon your agent. And what happens is this. I'll give you an example. So I had a situation where one of my agents was working a deal, and it was highly competitive. It was a hot house, hot market, neighborhood, multiple offers, and we're trying to give everybody a fair shake. And my agent was, didn't have a whole lot of experience with dealing with those multiple offer situations, had done mostly buyer sales, but had the listing in this case. He was selling a house. So he came to me and he said, look, this is what we have. And we laid these deals out. And just like you said, Jeb, we were looking at them like, how do we advise our seller and what the heck to take? Because we can advise them wrongly, and then they're mad at us because, rightfully so, we didn't vet the deal, right? We didn't thoroughly check those buyers out or the situation out, or advise them in the best scenario. So I'm looking at the deals, and I see the agent put in an escalation clause. And for you guys, we've mentioned escalation clause here tonight. An escalation clause means, let's just say there's a $500,000 house, or your offer's $500,000, but you're willing to pay up to $510,000 for the house. So there would be an escalation clause that said that you would pay up to $510,000 and maybe $1,000 increments over any offer above your original offer of $500,000. So that means you're at $500,000 with your offer, with an escalation of you'll pay up to $10,000 more in $1,000 increments. Somebody comes in at $501,000, it automatically puts you at $502,000, all the way up again and again until you get to your $510,000. So back to the story. The house was hot. Multiple offers came in. They all looked really good. The agent puts in an offer for their client with an escalation clause that was 100% incorrect. So they basically, in this scenario, let's just use the $500,000 price range to keep it easy. It was a $500,000 offer, let's just say. And they said that they would pay $1,000 over the next highest price up to $500,000. Is how they filled out the escalation clause addendum. Well, guess what? That was no escalation at all. They were already offering the $500,000. My point here is that a lot of agents would not go back to that other agent and say, by the way, you filled it out wrong. We got 15 offers. We don't have time to go back and teach agents how to properly fill out paperwork, right? In that situation, though, we did, I called the agent and I said, hey, look, obviously you have a broker, you have a manager. I knew who that manager was. I said, you fill out this wrongly. It may have been an error, but whatever. And she said to me, well, you know what? I've never filled out an escalation clause before. And she said, I just didn't know how to fill it out. So instead of that agent going to the manager and asking how to fill it out, she just submitted an offer that was incorrect. And it ended up, her client didn't get the deal. But my point is that if you're a buyer and your agent doesn't really know what they're doing and doesn't understand the market, you're hurting yourself and you don't even know why. You don't even know how. So, Jeb, let's kind of, talk about if you're a buyer right now and you're interviewing a buyer's agent and somebody to represent you to get this house that you want to buy and live in for years and make your home, the market's competitive. What are some of the things that you should ask your agent when you're interviewing?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer for that, Todd. To be completely honest, right? I mean, rarely do I get in I'm fortunate that a lot of my business is relational, so I'm not going through the true interview process on some of these sides with regards to buyers and what have you. But what I would tell, I'm pretty transparent, right, about the market, about how I approach business, about all of these things. And one of the things that I talk about often in some of my videos is how to write offers, right? I'm not giving advice. I can't give advice to people that have agents representing them, but things that you can do to help your offer stand out, right? And so I might, in a conversation like that, have that conversation like, okay, so these are some things that you could do to help your offer stand out, and maybe approach it from a different perspective of, because in an interview process, typically I'm going to talk about experience. I'm going to talk about, the market in general and give them an idea of that I know what I'm talking about, right? Not that I'm the best agent. There's a lot of great agents out there. And there's a lot of great agents in my market, but that I have the experience and the knowledge and I know the market and have relationships and so on and so forth, and try to pitch that side of it. But what I would tell you is if you're writing an offer right now, there's a couple of things that your agent should be doing, or at least having a conversation with you to let you make the decisions of whether or not you can do them in order to help your offer stand out. One of those would be an escalation clause, right? I mean, we talk about escalation clauses. Some buyers aren't able to do them because they're already buying at their highest price or what have you. But one thing I use is escalation clauses. I try to, present the cleanest offer possible. So I advise clients what that means. What is a clean offer? We try to shorten contingency periods. What is a contingency? A contingency is basically a clause that allows you to back out of a contract. Some examples would be an appraisal, a home inspection, seller disclosures, what have you. Here in California, we have 6 that are built into the contract. So we try to shorten those contingencies as much as possible to tighten that up. Remove things from the contract like a home warranty. I tell clients all the time, remove the home warranty. I'll pay for it. I'm willing to take my money. I'm willing to pay for your home warranty. Right? Because let's just make the cleanest offer we can up front. It's less that the seller has to pay, right? So less money out of the seller's pocket means more money in their pocket at the end of the day. And so we use that as much as we can. We might talk about removing contingencies in some cases. If I can find a property that's appraised close to where they're asking or what have you, we might talk about, hey, look, this could be a way to stand out. I don't necessarily recommend you do it, but this is an option for you. So it's basically talking about things that you could do to help your offer stand out. And one thing I will tell you is that's important, more so than anything, for your buyer to do is not only have all of this stuff, but present it professionally. There's nothing, like when you present an offer, to me, it should look a certain way from a buyer. And I'm not going to tell people how they need to do their business, but what I will say is a lot of times when I present an offer, the agent will come back and say, I love how professional that was presented. That means something to me, because it says something about the type of business that I do, the experience that I have, that, hey, listen, if we do business together, that's what you can expect. You can expect the I's to be dotted, the T's to be crossed, everything to be laid out as it was. And I think what you see is, and what do I mean by that? I mean, when I present an offer, it's one email, everything's included in one package, in one PDF, it's laid out. There's a cover letter, there's things that correspond in order, and there's an email that basically relays that. Sometimes I get emails, I'll get 10 different emails from the same agent emailing me all this different stuff. I have no idea what I'm even looking at. And so that stuff to me stands out, right? I mean, it's, you have an idea going in of what you're going to get if that's the person on the other side. The same is said about inexperience. You mentioned it a moment ago. Like, I'll be a mentor for anyone if I have the time to be, and guide people through the process, because people need to learn. But I don't want to be the one doing everything on a contract or hand holding the entire time. You need somebody that's self-sufficient on the other side, that knows what they're doing in this environment. And like you mentioned about the escalation clause, that could be, because the conversation you had, that could be the start of something you don't want to get into, just because, hey, listen, if they're already doing the original contract wrong, what's going to come down the road if they don't have the experience in this business and what have you. And so it's a balance, again, because there are great agents that are newer agents, but I think in this environment, you need somebody that understands kind of, how things roll out. And I'm telling people right now, hey, listen, if we're putting in an offer for a buyer, we're asking the selling agent, can we present our offer in person? They're like, no, there's COVID. Can we do it on Zoom? Like, we'd like to have a conversation with the seller and present our offer. I mean, we want to stand out from the masses. We're willing to have that conversation. Can you ask your seller if that's okay? And so who's doing that? No one. I mean, nobody is going to, most agents wouldn't be comfortable doing that. But hey, listen, if I can have a conversation with the seller, present my offer in person, maybe that helps me as a professional stand out amongst the competition. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it never goes anywhere, but the fact that I'm willing to do it, I think shows, what I bring to the table when representing buyers. So just my little 2 cents there on that. And then, the buyer offer letter is one of those things at the moment that seems to be a fair housing issue, potentially, at least here in the state of California. And so this house that I just sold, or it's not sold yet, just went into escrow. I had buyers drop off the letter on the seller's doorstep. Like, it wasn't even presented through the offer. The buyer took it there and put it on the doorstep. I'm not advising you do that, but I can tell you that sort of thing makes an impression, because, that not many people are doing those out of the box things.
Yeah. And Jeb, I mean, like, to your point about the letter and fair housing and things like that. I mean, look, the deals are between the buyers and the sellers. Right. I mean, we're communicators. So, yes, there are things that we can say and we can't say, obviously. And, and we don't want to. I mean, we want to be fair for everybody, but, certainly you can't stop your buyer from going and dropping off a letter. I mean, what are you going to do? Punish them? And you're right. I mean, all great points. We have a meeting that's coming up, a sales meeting. We have a monthly sales meeting. And this meeting, I'm prepared to talk about these pain points, these buyer pain points, because I think that as being leaders, we're commissioned, like I said, to figure this out. I think the buyers out there should be interviewing their agents thoroughly. I think that they should be asking questions. How many other buyers in my price range are you working with right now in the area that I'm looking? Because I think, when it comes down to, how much competition am I going to have within you?
No,
my
I agree.
agent. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 of me and we're all looking in the same area, that may be a conflict for me. What's your availability to show me? I mean, agents are always saying, look, in this market to the client, you have to be prepared. We got to go strike while the iron's hot. If I show you a property today, we got to go see it today. Well, what if the agent doesn't have time to show me today and I'm the one that wants to see it today? So I think you need to know that time is very critical. Asking your agent, what is it that I can do to be the best buyer, the most prepared buyer and make the most sense? I mean, how can I be the most effective buyer? You mentioned having a face-to-face meeting. I have a situation right now. I have a referral that we had given to another agent in another state. And, I was talking with the other agent and I said, look, it was one of those situations where they were miles apart. And by the way, guys, in my opinion is everybody has a zone. You've got a buyer that has a zone. They have a $500,000 price range, but they could afford $550,000. You have a seller that's selling for $750,000, but they'll take $700,000. It's not always price. It's understanding where those zones are. If you can push the zones together, or the rings so that they overlap, you can make a deal happen. So this was a situation where, the buyer was on one ideal, the seller's on another ideal. We were trying to get the rings to overlap and we were really close. And the seller just didn't want to give in anymore. And I think that if you ask an agent, what is your strategy? What is your negotiation strategy? Like, how do you get my offer accepted? And I think if an agent comes back and says that, we're going to try these different ideas, or these are some of the ways that we're making it happen. The way that this deal got done was they did just that. They had a meeting. They brought everybody together and said, hi, Mr. Seller, meet my wife, my buyer partner, meet my 3 kids that love this property. Now the question comes in, is that, somebody's going to conjure up this idea that could be a violation there. The bottom line is people are still buying people, right? I mean, the seller has a heartbeat, and is seeing that these buyers really love that place. You know what? The deal just happened.
Right.
The deal just happened. They made it happen. They said, you know what? The seller said, you know what? I can remember when I would play out in this field with my kid and we fished off of the river, that's going through the property. They made a connection. So I think that, how do we advise our agents? How do we advise the buyers to interview the agents? How do we bring now in this meeting that I'm having on Tuesday? It's all about, guys, how do we teach you how to win in these pain points? How do we bring the buyers the ability to realize, their dream?
I see this happen a lot, but on the other side where, and this as a buyer, you should know this. As a seller, you should know this. A lot of times agents get in the middle of a transaction. Agents negotiate on their seller's behalf, on their buyer's behalf, without ever having that conversation with their seller. And that makes deals fall apart. I see it all the time. And I can't say that 100%, but when you propose something and somebody gets back to you, 15 seconds later, that's an absolute no. And they go down this whole rabbit hole of why or whatever, people get defensive, right? In an argument, not that negotiation is an argument, because it's not in most cases, but it can be. But people get defensive when they feel like they're being challenged. And no better point than when you're selling a house and you're representing your seller or your buyer or whatever, and you feel like you need to justify maybe something you said to the seller or something you said to the buyer, and you're getting in the middle of that transaction. So as an agent, what I can tell you is just put whatever somebody proposes, put it in front of the seller. Let the seller respond. And maybe you have to help the seller understand maybe where they're coming from. And you mentioned a moment ago, how do you approach a seller that, that where the buyer came in less or what have you. And I do this all the time. I tell sellers all the time, let's think of this from the buyer's perspective, right? They want the house for the least amount of money. You want the house for the most amount of money. And so let's think about what the buyer's going through right now in their negotiation. And on the buy side, I say, hey, listen, let's think from the seller's perspective, right? They're in a market that's super competitive. There's not a lot of offers out there, or they have multiple offers on the property, not a lot of inventory out there. they're leveraged, right? They're negotiating, they're standing their ground. Let's think from their perspective. It's not about you. It's a negotiation, right? And that doesn't mean they can't come off of it. But I think what people need to understand is that negotiating is about two parties working together. It's not about a win or a loss. And that's where people get confused. There's these old school, movies out there, and we can name a lot of them, where it's all about sales and all about winning. And yeah, it feels good to win, but if you can put two things together, maybe it's not winning, it's in both people's best interest. I think that's where the real gold is in this business is getting two parties to mutually agree and both feel like they got a fair deal at a reasonable price. That's everybody wins, and and you're not looked down on for grinding somebody on one way or the other. It doesn't mean you can't negotiate hard, but negotiate fair and make sure you're representing both parties without getting involved.
How many times have you heard an agent say, I'm not presenting that, or I'm not going to say that, or it's not even up to them. I mean, they don't own the house. They're not the buyer. I always say, hey, look, I don't make the decisions. I advise, and, I'll take it to them, and you're 100% right. It's bringing everybody together to win. If you're dealing, buyers and sellers hire us. Well, we accept to work with buyers and sellers, right? We don't have to if we don't feel it's a good synergy or a good fit. And I think everybody, if somebody really wants to go into a deal where they want to get over, or they want to feel like they've won or beat, I think part of that too, Jeb, is understanding the different motivating factors. Absolutely. Everybody has motivating factors. It's not, like I said, it's not always money. It's, feeling like the house that they built is going to be loved or cared for. It's about, feeling like they did a good thing for the next generation, right? That comes in. So I think a good agent, I always encourage, my agents to find out what the real motivations are. And guys, if you're a buyer out there, you want an agent that gets along with people, because what you have to realize is that, just like Jeb said, the agent sometimes gets in the middle of the deal from happening. If the agent doesn't like you, or you're just your agent's a jerk. I hate to say it like that, but you whether they're a jerk or not. And they may not be, winning points with getting your deal effectively to the buyer or seller. Let's give some advice to some buyer's agents. So, and like I said, we're about to have a sales meeting on Tuesday, and some of the things that we're going to talk about is, how do you rise up in this competitive market? Because I'm competitive, right? You're competitive. We're both very competitive people. So, absolutely. What are some of the ways that you see that an agent can be actively getting people to call them about selling their house?
As I mentioned at the beginning of this, my business is primarily relational, right? So it's built on relationships. It's built on creating advocates of my business, maybe from the experience that they had with me while working with me, helping people buy or sell, or maybe it's just knowledge, right? Showing people that I'm experienced in my business and telling them how I get my business and that sort of thing. So I come from this a little bit differently. I know there's people that are great at farming. There's people that's great at door knocking, that are great at doing things on the internet or what have you. But the value in this business, in my opinion, long-term lies in relationships. And so if you're a new agent and you don't have necessarily the past clients and what have you first, your friends and family or your sphere of influence is where you should focus a lot of your business and your time or what have you. But I would think more so than anything else is get the education, right? Get the experience, whether it's reading it, whether it's talking to other agents and asking questions, whatever it is, to show that you're knowledgeable. And then it's about having conversations, getting in front of people, and however you want to do that, whether you're a door knocker, whether you're, doing YouTube or some other social media platform where you're doing videos and conveying, that you're a good agent, because you can't sell in most cases without getting in front of people, or at least getting people to find you somehow. So, it's a tough one, Todd. I don't know that I have the right answer for a lot of people, because I've been doing this for a number of years now. If I were a new agent, I would work on a team. I would work on a team that does business, that has access to open houses and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, here in Southern California, we can't do open houses. We haven't been able to do them since March. So the people that got their business that way are now going, what do I do? But the problem with an environment like this, or a market like this, what I see is that people go away from the basics. And for me, what the basics are talking to the people who know me, my past clients, friends, and family, following up with those people. I'm a big Brian Buffini guy, as I think you know. So me is calls, notes, and Popeyes. It sounds cheesy, but it's worked well for my business. So for me, those are the basics. So always do the basics. And I can't say I'm 100% right, because I go off on tangents and start doing other crazy things too. But I know where my business comes from. I know where the majority of my business comes from. And so right now it's easy to look for the shiny object, the internet platforms and all of these different ways to try to get business. But what I will tell you, for me, and I've seen it day in and day out, is the value is in those people that know you. They know the kind of person you are. They know your integrity. They know how you operate, because, there's a chance that somebody knows somebody that's selling. And if you can convey to them that, that you're knowledgeable and experienced, and you're actively asking for referrals from those people, you're going to be able to build a good business on that long term. But, again, I don't know that that's, the right advice that, for the new agent.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, everything's relationship, and certainly staying in touch with those past, if you've managed to be in business long enough, I mean, certainly keeping in touch. I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have a good follow-up system. And, I mean, we become some of their best friends and closest non-family members, right? Because we, get so, close to our clients, helping them with where they live. One of the things that we're doing is we're really getting heavy into, the postcards. So, what I'm telling my agents is really take an inventory of your buyers. If you have 10 or 12 buyers that are out there, really identify them as far as the areas that they're looking, what they're looking for, what their stretch is, what their not so ideal is, but still it's in that zone. It fits in that, they'll be happy because they can make those modifications. And then what we're doing is really kind of going after sending out those postcards saying, I have a buyer. And we're not, kidding or,
right.
being, the old days, there was a lot of talk about, calling up for sale by owners and saying, oh, I have a buyer that may be interested in your house, and just to kind of go there and try and sell them on being the listing agent. And,
that still happens, by the way.
It probably does. But, legitimately having that buyer, if you're an agent and you have a buyer in that price range, and you send a card and you say, hey, look, it's January 29th. If you're planning to sell within the next 4 to 5 months, please call me. I have a buyer, that's qualified, that, is in this price range, the $700,000 price range, whatever. And if your place is right, they may give you top dollar for it. May is a big word, but look, I mean, we're trying to get that call for our buyer. So, what we're trying to do is really canvass those neighborhoods, take inventory of our buyers, canvass those neighborhoods, trying to get those phone calls. And obviously with the, if you're the disclosure that we're not trying to take somebody's listing. Right. I mean, if, one of the big things is, it's if you don't have an agent, if you don't have or have your realtor call, right? Have your agent call us. Your friend or agent's about to list a house.
What I've seen with success with a lot of those buyer letters like that, I mean, not buyer letters, like I have a buyer letter to sellers, is the more specific you are in those letters, name the person, tell about their family. Maybe you include a picture of that family in that letter. They get a lot higher response than the ones that are a template that you send out to every single community. Get specific. If you got a buyer that truly wants to live in a community, if they've missed out on property in that community, say that. Say what happened. Give people so that there's some emotion to it, because I think that stuff stands out, right? I mean, and one thing I'll say too, you brought something else to light here. I know you want to end this. If you have a buyer that missed out on a property in a neighborhood, for example, the one that I just listed, hey, go out on your buyer's behalf, and maybe your buyer goes with you. Go check the houses in the neighborhood. Door knocking is one of those weird things right now because of COVID and what have you. But maybe you take your buyer and say, hey, look, my buyer was one of 13 offers on this house. They missed out. They really want this neighborhood. Have you had any thoughts of selling, or at what price would you be a seller? Right. And see if there's interest, because that stuff matters. I mean, the more detailed, the more you can provide somebody to show that it's real, I think the better reaction you'll get on the other side.
Absolutely. And man, I could talk to you all night. I mean, we could certainly, it's such a, you're such a great guest, man. And I appreciate you so much, Jeb, and the value that you're providing, on the West Coast. And man, thank you so much for being on the show again.
No, I appreciate the opportunity as always, Todd. You're doing a good thing, man, for agents and buyers and sellers and everyone. So I appreciate you letting me be a part.
And so are you. Look, guys, if you haven't checked out Jeb's YouTube, I mean, we'll have it in the link here at the bottom, wherever you're watching or listening. Definitely subscribe to Jeb. Shout out, guys, if you need assistance. We're not trying. If you're represented by an agent, lean in on them. Really. Use your representation. We're not trying to replace that. We're just trying to give you good, sound advice from years and years of experience on both sides, and, just trying to be a sounding board for you. But if you don't have an agent and you certainly want to reach out to Jeb or myself, we have an amazing network of people that really care and that are just, really qualified to do you a great service as a buyer and seller. Guys, thanks so much for watching tonight. And we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.